It's not quite 3:30, so.
Yeah, we'll wait a little bit.
So we are now streaming live on YouTube. Woohoo!
Oh,
Yeah, I see that. My daughter in Norfolk is always sending me something on YouTube. Mom, did you get it? Just send me a text or send me a call. I can't keep it all that stuff.
I see Karen coming.
So yes, it's Sarah, That's she pronounced it.
Siri Russell is my
Yeah.
co-presenter. I will introduce her after we get started.
Okay.
Nice.
I've gotten to meet her through something she's working on with the Historic Preservation Committee before, when we could meet in person. So I've met her, I think, twice that way, but
Okay.
I see Diantha's here.
Diantha's coming on.
And Karen looks like she might be.
I'm here.
Hi, Karen.
Hey,
Hi.
Karen.
Okay.
So I just am joining you guys for a half an hour because I have an EDA meeting at 4, but I had a chance to at least do it today. So,
Well, thank you for coming.
well, I probably should keep my mouth shut, but other than that, and I will slip away a little before 4, okay?
Okay, thank
Hey,
you.
how is everybody? Good to see everybody. Hey, Catherine, long time, no see.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on. I'm very proud of myself. I got on by myself.
That is really cool. That's cool.
I usually have somebody to help.
Well, you know, I have found, I'm not a techie person, and I
I'm
found
not.
platform kind of user-friendly though. Don't you guys agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And I also, my kids can help me.
Yeah, that's the part. If I had the kids around me, I'd be fine.
Here we go. I see my picture now. Although
There's Diantha. Hello.
Oh, here,
just take the zoom off.
there you are.
Woo, it's scary.
There
That's great.
Oh, there's Donna. Yeah, my kids have been helping me with technology stuff. I was having trouble with the Microsoft team meetings,
Mary.
and it's because my earbuds are Apple, and in that platform, they don't work. And also, I found out if I don't put them away in the case, they still try to connect with my computer. But in Zoom, it's not a problem, but I was having so much trouble in this Microsoft team meeting. And I found out it's because my earbuds are Apple, and it was a Microsoft weren't trying to work together, I guess, so.
How are you, Phyllis?
I'm doing all right.
You look wonderful. Are everybody in your family well and healthy? And you all work really hard, I know, in social services these days.
Yep, everybody's earning their paycheck.
I was going to say. We are discovering that we can work from home.
I would never have dreamed it.
Yeah.
Never.
I've been working from home for 11 years, and so I'm used to that part of it. What I miss, however, is that I used to be able to have lunch with people or go have a glass of wine with people. And it's that part of the social isolation that I think has been very difficult for me.
Yep.
But like I say, 11 years working from home, I'm pretty used to that. I think Zoom works better than Teams for these sorts of things. I heard the comment
I agree.
I think you were talking about. I actually met with a constituent today live at Seaville Coffee. It was like the most exciting thing for the 3 months to meet face to face with someone.
I had a friend yesterday that said to me that her church has moved to Zoom, you know, and they're having church services. And she said, it's so good because I can have a Bloody Mary.
This is iced tea. It's just straight.
But I have water.
Yeah, I have water too.
You know what? We do a prayer thing every day at 1 o'clock, and then we have service on Sunday morning. So you know what we say, Diane? It is so great. We can be in our gown. We don't have to get dressed up to go to church.
Right, exactly.
I
Well,
said
I'm
to
not wearing shoes. I will tell you that, Catherine. I have no shoes on right now.
Well, I've been to the doctor, so I'm dressed today. But it's so funny. We were like, do we have to get dressed up, go to church now? Or can we just keep on going like this? It's
You
a
have, to
different-
pay, you have to pay a lot more attention to what you're doing, though,
You do.
these sort of meetings,
Yeah.
because everything you do, everyone else is watching.
Yes. So it
That's
looks
true.
like
Or you
we
can-
have, it looks like we have Amy
We have Amy.
and a friend.
And Karen's video came up, so that was good. Hey, Karen.
Yeah, Karen's
Hey.
there. All right,
Or
so
one of
let's,
your
why don't we, since we have two supervisors, let's get started and try to get into the presentation, since I know at least Diantha can't stay for the whole time.
Okay.
We'll call order at I have 3:33 by way of Zoom, and we have a quorum, so we could quickly, if people have had a chance to look at the May meeting minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone looked at those and we could get a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the May minutes.
I'll second.
So, all right. And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I think Lisa got what she needed there, hopefully. And then we had the notes for June, the items that you sent out, Phyllis. I hope everyone got to read through those. And I thought if you wanted to highlight some of the things, and then maybe later we could go back, and if people had questions about any particular information item, we could bring that up at the end, since we already have Siri here. Is that
That's fine.
okay?
So I wanted to be sure and introduce Siri Russell, who is the director of the our Office of Equity and Inclusion. And she and I have been working very closely together on working with the general human service needs in the community due to the pandemic, and beyond what DSS does. So recently she presented a kind of a summary of what efforts have been done to reach out to vulnerable populations. And I thought it would be really helpful to share that information with you all, so that you can know that there's a lot more that's going on than just DSS. So Siri, once again, thank you for helping with this. So we're going to tag team this. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint, and we will send it out to you after the meeting so you can have it with you. And then I'll have Siri chime in when she has more information about a particular item than I do. Let me see if I can do this. Hold on. This looks different. Okay. Why do I not have a browse?
I think like with mine, if I hover over it, the bottom things will pop up. I don't know how yours will, but mine has things pop up if I move my cursor and I see share screen.
This looks different than it did last time. All right, bear with me.
Sure.
There we go. Oh, no.
I just. Whoops. Okay, do you all see what looks like a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
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 You do? Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. All right. Okay, still with me? Whoa.
You lost it.
Well, it looks like it's the wheel of death.
Now, why did it do that?
Maybe shifting from,
Oh.
there you go.
There you
Now
go.
do you see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Theory, are you with me?
Yes, I am.
Good. All right. Okay. So as I said, I wanted to kind of give some just brief information about our larger human services response that the county has really been involved in, and Siri's taken a significant lead on this, and also DSS has been stepping in as well. So there are three primary categories that we've been working on. One is mitigative techniques, housing and feeding, and vulnerable populations. So first would be the mitigative techniques, and there's been a lot of work done in terms of masks, fitting, and long-term care facilities. Siri, can I ask you to elaborate on any of that?
Absolutely. So there's not a whole lot to say necessarily, but I think one of the key points is just understanding that there was a recognition on the part of our fire rescue staff, especially, that in many communities where there had been significant outbreaks, especially in long-term care facilities, there had been issues around the fit of the N95 gear. And so this was something that was worked out in coordination with the National Guard, and they did over 400 tests of facility staff to ensure proper fit of their PPE, which seems like a small thing, but is really key in terms of mitigating and preventing exposure to COVID.
And the fire and rescue and DSS have also partnered together in terms of outreach to nursing homes and assisted living facilities to try to help coach them and advise them on other protective measures, trying to really take a let's work together kind of approach. So the second category is in the housing and feeding. I want to say something briefly about the workforce feeding, and Siri can elaborate on the partnership that we did with Frontline Foods. But I was very grateful that the staff that come into the office every day, and I have about 10 of those folks. Everyone else is teleworking for the most part. And coming and going, but there are 10 staff that come here every day, 8 to 5, and they were benefited from the lunches as well. And I can't tell you how much they enjoyed that. There was a much gratitude in terms of my staff receiving that. In fact, whenever somebody happened to not be here and the lunch was left over in the lunchroom, it would often disappear in a nanosecond. But so Siri, can I turn it over to you to talk about some more about that and then the other categories?
Okay. Absolutely. So with the workforce feeding and the Frontline Foods partnership, that was actually an extension of the World Central Kitchen organization, which you guys may have heard of as, an international, really a global effort to feed the most vulnerable. Frontline Foods became an extension of that to actually feed frontline staff. And so we were able to do that in coordination with the city, the university, and the Cultivate Charlottesville organization, which you guys may know was formerly known as Charlottesville Food Justice Network. That has since transitioned away from frontline feeding and more to community feeding. And so what you'll see in the next stages will be more intentionality around getting meals to vulnerable community populations. And you're already seeing some of that happening with, in particular neighborhoods in the county, including Southwood, where they just did meals about a week ago, and then also Barracks West and University Heights. And that will just hopefully spread from here.
And then the congregate housing, you want to elaborate on that? With the work with TJAC and the hoteling and et cetera? Siri, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, just if you could elaborate on what the work that's been done in the congregate housing and then workforce housing.
Right, right. So with the congregate housing and workforce housing, there's been an effort to basically to be housing staff, both, and that's both county staff and, you know, our partners with CARDS, the Charlottesville Albemarle, was it Rescue Squad, and city and university folks in temporary housing. Has primarily been hotels, though there has also been an effort to at least develop a list of potential Airbnb locations for folks to stay at if they needed. And that's for folks who need to self-isolate either because they've been exposed or because they've tested positive. And then as for congregate housing, this has really been where the county has been supplying some additional funding to support the efforts of TJAC and PACHM to house folks who are experiencing homelessness in area hotels. And I know it's been, what, 2 hotels, Phyllis, that we have been able to put people in?
Yeah, I think one hotel, we were able to reserve a whole floor for anyone who had tested positive. And the other was just they might not have tested positive, but were either high risk or just to basically thin the shelter out. And then also the women of PACHM were moved to the building that's currently the Region 10 Women's Substance Abuse Treatment Center. So while they were still together, they were at least in separate rooms, as opposed to just a large room on cots. And then the men were moved to the Haven. And then when possible, they were moved to individual hotel rooms. One was La Quinta, and I can't remember the other hotel.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important to note about both of those efforts, both the workforce housing and the congregate housing, is that it wasn't just housing that happened, but also, you know, folks were provided, if they needed, with meals and other sorts of, you know, mental health and supportive materials. So really there was an effort to be providing, you know, total wraparound services and not just the shelter piece.
I also wanted to say, I think this is going to be a continuing issue because certainly we're starting to hear some concerns from providers such as PACHM about the fact that it's really not going to be possible to continue this sort of congregate model as we go into the fall and winter. So I think we're having some conversations at the TJAC stands for Thomas Jefferson Coalition for the Area. No, Thomas Jefferson Area Coalition for the Homeless. And so we've been starting to have conversations about how we can address that real concern. And then the third category is just some outreach and service delivery that we've been working on together regarding assisting those in what we call the vulnerable populations. If you recall, in my informational items last month, I talked about our Bright Stars and Family Support staff delivering food, household supplies, and clothes. They're continuing to do that. the other thing is that they also volunteered to help out with the face coverings that were distributed at the sites where the schools were providing meals. One of my family support staff is really taking a lead in a program called Kid Lift, and which is just gathering donated food supplies and then distributing them. And two local TV stations have run stories about that program, and actually someone in Serena's office, not Siri, but Serena, who's our here from the what does CAPE stand for? Communication and Public Engagement Office.
That's correct.
She came and made a video of the room where we keep the food supplies, because we didn't want the reporter coming into the building. So anyway, there's even footage for that. And then I mentioned the face covering distribution. Siri was instrumental in getting those face coverings that then could be distributed to the areas where we felt like there might be some vulnerable population. I think you probably have heard about that the county gave $150,000 to the city's Pathways program, who then turned around and administered that funding to county residents who were facing difficulty in paying their rent or mortgage or utility bill. And then after that 150,000 ran out, we were able to help some additional folks to the tune of about $10,000 from our own emergency utility fund. And if you remember, in the county budget for FY21, that fund was actually increased to try to help more folks in terms of that financial need. We talked a lot last month about the extraordinary increase in the SNAP applications. It's still going up, but not as significant. The TANF applications have kind of leveled out, but that's been a significant impact on the workload, and that will continue because every one of those new cases will come up for renewal. And since they all came in one fell swoop, that's going to be a challenge for my staff at renewal time. And then Child Protective Services, since March 16th, we've had over 600 calls of concern. Around 35 of those are valid complaints. The number of CPS calls have gone down somewhat, and our hypothesis is because the schools are not in session. Siri, do you want to speak to the migrant farm worker and families outreach efforts?
Sure. So this has really been a collaboration and something that sort of happened, I think, organically for us. We sort of taught, Phyllis and I started early on meeting every week. And one of the things that came up in one of our initial discussions was, hey, we understand that migrant farm workers and their families are potentially at risk, and also transients, which is especially important during, a public health pandemic population. And we also immediately understood that there wasn't a coordinated effort around communicating about what was happening there and how we were going to be delivering services to those families. And so what we did was create at the time, weekly, that we've recently moved to bi-weekly, coordinating phone call that's a regional effort. It's got representatives of the city, of the county, of Nelson County, and then folks who also service even broader than that, where we're able to connect with folks who are on the ground with migrant farm workers. And we've been able, through that partnership, to supply, to coordinate the supply of needed personal protective equipment like face coverings or hand sanitizer directly to camps, as well as push out information from the health department translated in directly to growers and workers. So I think it's altogether been something that we found a lot of value in and plan on continuing.
So then some more highlights from the DSS side. I mentioned, I think in the info items, since March 16th, we've had 3 children come into care. We've had a significant number of placement changes because I think foster parents are fairly stressed given the kids are not going to school. We've had some kids have run away and then been found and have had to be placed in more restrictive settings. With both adult services and adult protective services, there's been an increase in the adult services referrals. And by adult services, I mean the folks that are asking to be screened for in-home care. And I think obviously the interest is keeping them at home as opposed to entering a facility. On the other hand, there's been a slight decrease in adult protective services, and our hypothesis is that we are limited in terms of our ability to go into nursing homes and assisted livings because of the facilities not wanting outsiders. Our family partnership meetings that are done when there's a significant decision point in a child welfare case are continuing to happen. They're held virtually. We're using Zoom for those. It's a challenge to do that, but we've tried very hard to maintain the integrity of that service delivery. There's been a significant amount of support in our community for childcare providers. Through the Emergency Operations Center, requests come in through childcare providers for personal protective gear. And so their hand sanitizers, masks, gloves are constantly being supplied to childcare providers and replenished. And then my staff have been very involved in helping the providers navigate through the new policy changes that came from the federal government to try to ease the restrictions that make it hard for the providers to stay open. And so we've tried to do a lot of coaching and support around that. Siri, want to talk about the Yancey School Community Center and what's happening there?
I love talking about the Yancey School Community Center and what's happening there. And so I think as it sort of relates directly to these efforts, one thing that we were able to really do here with the Yancey School Community Center was really see sort of the fruit of all of our labor to invest and connect with the surrounding community pay off. And so something that's been happening here is that we've been having weekly phone calls with Southern Albemarle community members and organizers. I know Supervisor Price, who's on this call, has also been attending those meetings where we've been able to use that connection both to, I should have my video on, I'm sorry, because I'm making like hand motions, but we've been able to both push out information and receive information. So we've been able to direct resource in that area along the lines of both public health information, of face coverings, hand sanitizer, and other sorts of needed materials, but we've also been receiving the resource of their knowledge and of their labor in terms of really supporting that community both through this time and in anticipation of recovery. And one of the only reasons I think that we felt like we wanted to call that out was that it is, we believe, a potential model for how we can be connected across the county, especially in rural areas where it's really the connections to the community members themselves that that make the difference between resiliency and the alternative.
So the work is continuing. We have just recently started some dialogue with the health department and UVA to talk about some targeted outreach to vulnerable communities. Siri and I have talked a lot about the need to really reach out to parts of the county that are more isolated. There's concern about the seniors that are isolated, that can no longer go to the senior center, and that just folks who just don't have the resources to be able to come into the town or the urban ring to get to receive the benefits of the other outreach services. So we're talking a lot about that, and we're having conversation about with the health department about just partnering together with that. Siri, do you want to talk about the long-term strategy part there?
Sure. And so one of the things that, I think I mentioned earlier that the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Department of Social Services, and now also bringing our housing folks on board, we're having these weekly meetings because one of the things that we recognize is that the current events, right, we still don't necessarily understand what all of the ramifications for that will be. But what we do, I think, know right now is that there are many things that are being revealed, right? Areas where maybe our muscles in terms of our connection or understanding of some of those vulnerabilities haven't been as strong as they could be. And so we're really committed right now, long-term, to increasing our resiliency and to deepening our understanding of our community and all of the sort of systems of resiliency that are a piece of that. So the infrastructure around food security, broadband obviously has been a piece of this, public health and access to these sort of things. Really so when we talk about long-term strategy, we're talking about leveraging partners, continuing to collaborate, increasing our understanding, and then acting on the things that we learn. So that obviously, I'm not hoping that we have a next time pandemic, but any sort of future event will be stronger and more resilient coming out of this.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can come back to you all. So yeah, I'm happy to open it up for questions.
So I think Diantha had to go, I think. It looks like I know she told us she had to leave at 4. I was going to offer her to ask questions first since she was not able to stay the whole time, but it looks like she had to go. So I guess, I have a couple comments and questions, but I'd like to let others go first. Anybody have questions, comments, ideas?
I have a couple questions, I think. The first one, I was wondering, the face coverings we were providing to members of the community, where did they come from? Are those things that were ordered? They are commercial products, or were they through like the Seville Craft Aid program where they were made by members of the community and then donated?
So thank you for the question. So it's sort of a combination. We have been partnering with Seville Craft Aid, a little bit different in our approach in that we were working to push out, specifically targeting community partners that service vulnerable populations, whereas, Seville Craft Aid, they're receiving orders, right? So moving sort of in different directions in terms of the flow. Because we were pushing out, we really had to have bulk. And so ours were commercially ordered from a couple of providers, some from Custom Inc. and some from Virginia Correctional Enterprises, those that were in the larger orders. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I just, I think it's remarkable we were able to get so many and get them distributed when you hear about shortages. Hopefully those shortages are not as bad as they were to begin with. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that, especially given the governor's press conference today where he was starting to talk about the phased reopening of schools. I think that making sure that members of the community have access to face coverings if they're going to be expected to wear them, and I do worry about especially members of our population that can't spend a lot of money on something like that. So you know, they're not always going to self-identify if they can't afford to purchase masks for their family, and so I think that we're going to have to be really diligent about reaching out and making it very easy to get them and very accessible, offering them instead of waiting for people to ask for them, I think is gonna have to be a priority for us as a community. So I'm glad to hear that that's already basically started and is underway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say that, you know, we wouldn't have gotten to that 20,000 without the help of our partners. And, you know, the partners specifically that I'm talking about, and I'm going to say some, and I'm going to apologize because it's a very long list, but just to give you an idea, right, we partnered with Piedmont Housing Alliance, we partnered with Habitat for Humanity, so they're passing out to all of their homes. We partnered with the Jefferson Madison Regional Library System, with Sin Barreras, with the African American Pastors Council, with JABA. So just as you said, yeah, there's a very long list. Lots of people who really made that happen wouldn't have gotten there without them. And so I do want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think that that's great. Thank you so much. The second question had to do with the lower rates of identified, I guess, you had complaints about child welfare and adult welfare, but in general, I think even in the last meeting, you were saying how that they went down. And one of the reasons we're thinking about that is because in the adult care facilities, they have fewer visitors, but then also the children aren't going to the schools. And that's where a lot of times we were identifying neglect or abuse. And so, you know, this could potentially be a long-term issue. And I'm wondering what sort of changes we're going to make to our identification process, because, you know, we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, oh, well, we're not going to be able to identify. I mean, the abuse and neglect traditionally goes up in times of high stress, and this is absolutely a high stress time. So I'm a little bit worried that our numbers are going down, and what are we going to do about that?
So one of the things that we've already done is we've tried to do using social media to just put out, you know, if you have a concern, if you see something, you know, in your neighborhood or in the store, just try to put out there that we are still, you know, open for business basically, and receiving calls. You know, I think it's with doctors' offices reopening, you know, that's another big source of our calls. And so hopefully if there are concerns, we'll start to get calls from the doctor's offices. But you know, and you know, the childcare providers are still, you know, seeing these kids. So there's a chance that we, you know, could continue to, you know, receive some calls of concern. But it's really just a matter of continuing to get the word out to say, if you have a concern, then call. I think there's been a lot of publicity around that at the state level as well. We're not the only locality seeing that. So
I mean, I don't want to like advertise, but in a way, something like advertising may not be a bad idea. You know, we're not asking for people to be abusing and neglecting other people, but I almost wonder if the public or if people are not aware that the services are still here. And so that's why they're not calling. They may think, oh, well, but no one can do anything about this right now anyway. You know, would a targeted internet advertisement or a Google ad or something in the paper make a difference? I don't know.
Well, we put stuff on the website and Facebook. which gets a lot more hits than the paper. And basically our message was, if you're concerned, call us. You know, you don't have to decide. You don't have to know enough. You just call and talk to us. And so we put it on Facebook. We might have even put it on. I know we put it on the county website, our website, and both in the county Facebook page. And so, and there's April was Child Abuse Prevention Month. So we did a lot of media blasts on that regarding the pinwheel event. And so we've tried to do that, to really say, you know, don't hesitate to call if you see something of concern.
Thank you.
That too, is, you know, there's an idea. Well, I was thinking about what Mary was saying too, because I've had the same concerns about domestic violence, you know, and the increase in that with people stuck at home together, and then the people who sometimes notice these things, you know, aren't acting as much to notice that. So I worried about that. But one idea I had, Phyllis, too, is a way to approach sort of getting the word out there, is something that I think DSS is always working on, is trying to have a more positive image with the community. So we definitely want people to know if they're concerned to still call, and they don't need to be an expert to know when to call. But also it's that message to families that if they are experiencing stress, and, you know, just even if it's not rent or food or all these other things, that we're here to help, you know, the department's there to help, you know. I mean, historically people are a little bit wary to reach out for help because they're concerned about, once you open that door, what does it mean? But I think that's something we've always wanted for the department, is to have people feel more comfortable coming forward to ask for services, and understanding that it doesn't mean they're in trouble. It just means they have to ask for help. And we know asking for help is difficult, but I think that could be a part of the message that's sent, you know, instead of just someone notices something, they call. That if you need help and you're having stress, because all of us are, and we all deal with it in different ways, it's okay to, you know, these resources are there to ask for help. That's just a thought.
Received your tax bill, you'll see that there was a major insert in there about where you could get help. Amy, raising your hand. Amy's been raising her hand. Amy, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say I did receive that information with the tax bill, and it was really informative. I had been thinking also, you know, I have the newsletter from the county with updates on COVID, and I had thought maybe, Phyllis, that we could put something in that update, just, you know, as Jenny was saying, if you see, or even Mary was saying, if you see something, say something, or if you need help, maybe to add a line on that newsletter. And the other thing I had thought of was the next door. You know, that's, I guess it's an app. I'm trying to think. I think it's just an app. And I was thinking, if there's a way that we could, even all of us, I'm sure Mary's probably on it too, you know, give us like a little blurb that we could just post as a PSA to, you know, because I feel like the next door is really active. And I did have one or two other questions, if this is the time.
Yeah, so what I could do is reach out to Emily Kilroy and Serena and Abby from our Cape office to get some help with the language, and also how to post it on the newsletter. And then I can send you what we'll post, and you can post it places that you know.
I think it would be, you know, that's just another way to get the word out.
I think most of the PTOs would also share it through their school PTO newsletter or websites.
Great ideas.
You know, the other thing I just wondered, you had said that $150,000 was given for help with rent, and how many people about did benefit from that?
Siri, I don't think we have the number of individuals or families, do we?
The number of individuals or families who received face coverings?
No, from Pathways,
From Pathways. I don't want to be quoted on it, so maybe I shouldn't say it out loud, right? But I believe it was close to 100 families.
Oh, wow.
Or households. The households would be a more accurate way of putting that.
I think just including some numbers like that kind of helps give perspective on how many people can benefit from these programs. And you had mentioned, Phyllis, that they're increasing the budget for next cycle. Do you know what the number will be?
The usual amount that's in that utility fund, and this as just as an aside, this was funding that is available for DSS clients, and it's historically been about 20,000. And then an increase came about when the CARES program was dissolved and the city and county got that money back. The county gave it to DSS. So the recommended increase from Jeff was an additional 20,000. I think that.
Nice. And it's always, you guys give so much information. Thank you so much.
So I had a thought. About the numbers. I just realized that since we cut the checks, I can probably get you an exact number of how many families or individuals or households. That would be a better way of saying that. So I can look that up. That would just be for the county. I don't know that same information for the city, but yeah.
That's fine. I think it's just helpful to know like how many people are impacted.
Yeah.
Kind of gives it.
But I do want, just as an aside, after the money we ran out of money, we received a list of people who had called in for help, but we couldn't help. And so what we did with that list is go through and to see if there were any existing DSS clients on that list, and then went through an assessment process to see if we could use our own funds to help them. So we were able to help a few more, but that list, I'm forgetting the total number, but it was a huge list. And also I neglected to mention that in addition to the Pathways program that the city managed, the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation also managed a process to help with financial assistance, and so folks would call them directly. If someone who called Pathways didn't want to have a bill paid, but rather just needed some cash, they would be referred over to CACF.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great questions.
So just for some insight, the North Garden Area Christian Community, we've been concerned, our board has been concerned whether everybody was having food and having things in our area that they needed, because the food bank people that usually give out food, they only had like 2 families to come. So my vice president, of course, is the pastor of 3 churches out here. So he was concerned. So we were trying to reach out to see is there any way that we could just put out information. So we did it through all of our 18 churches to say, do you have people that need food or need whatever in the community, to let us know and see if we could all sort of come together and piggyback on each other to make sure nobody was at least hungry at that time. We didn't get a lot of response. We're still working on it, but we didn't get a lot of response. However, the women ministry of my church, we piggyback with 100 Black women because they help us in our community day thing. So I got a call about that. And so we joined with them and had a drive-by free mass distribution Saturday before last. However, I know Albemarle County put one in the day just before us. Ours was planned, and then they did one at Crossroads Store the day before, which helped a lot of people in our area. But we had a lot. We put it out through the communities and through the, I would say probably 12, 15 community churches and throughout the community. We had a lot of people come out and get free masks. So we just set it up, and the women came out and distributed it all. But we set it up so they could drive through our church ground and turn around. Nobody got out, anything of that sort. And so that has helped a lot with, because we understood that maybe August, there was going to be another real need for masks or whatever. So we were trying to get the mask out to whoever or whomever, particularly that needed them and didn't have to buy them. I know that we have a lot of people in the area that are making masks and selling them, but we did the free getaway. And we also, this past Friday, I got 30 more masks donated to me if we were going to do it again. We haven't got that far yet because I haven't got masks in hand. We also had someone to drive up that particular day and donated a box of masks to the 100 ladies. The ladies was out there from that organization. So people are concerned about the mask situation. We have sort of a clothes closet with plenty of clothes. Some are new and some are used, and we've been trying to say if anybody needs clothes. We didn't get a response for that, but the church at Chestnut Grove, Edmond, they got some clothes donated to them like this past Saturday that they gave out for me. I didn't go, but I know a lot of people who did go. So there are some communities who are really getting stuff and trying to reach out for people who need. But we're not getting a lot of response to say we need. That's
Siri, was there a mass distribution at Yancey? There was, wasn't there?
that was that was before we had ours. I think it was a week before. It was like 2 weeks ago, and ours was Saturday, 3 weeks ago, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Nancy had theirs before we had ours. And but we do communicate. If something's going on with Yancey, our community usually get it. Or vice versa. We sent all kinds of stuff out to them that we were giving out free masks. And we did have people from Scottsville and Edmond all around to come out to pick up free masks. So we might do it again. I don't know. We have another project that's been offered to our women ministry. We've only been organized a little over a year. And we have a meeting this week because there are food people who have communication with bulk food of some groups of something that wants to help small organizations get food and whatever people need. I don't know a lot about that, and I don't know if our women ministry is going to take on that project, but I am going to look into it. I didn't see the governor's speech today, and so, Mary, we opening back school?
I mean, they don't really know. They outlined some phases and their plans for each phase. And of course, it's all dependent on the data and how things are going. But it was very interesting to hear their plans and what they expect. It was interesting, but it was also very worrying for me as a parent and as a teacher. So
Yeah.
I'm reserving my judgment until I can get a little bit more, few more details, and when we get closer to August and see how things really are going.
Yeah.
But masks are going to be a part of it. You know, if there's any face-to-face, every person is going to have multiple masks at their fingertips. So that's going to be really important.
Well, we canceled our community day. We're not going to have that, but we are taking on community projects in place of our community day. So
I have a couple of comments and then a question. Phyllis and Siri especially, thank you for all that y'all have done in running the meeting. And Jenny, thank you for the way you've guided it today. Mary, I thought you had some great questions in there. I think one of the big issues we deal with is too much information and not getting the information to who we need to get it to. Sometimes I just feel overwhelmed with the number of emails and things that come in, that sometimes it's hard to actually catch the details of all of those. And Amy, your ideas are very good on trying, other ways to help get the information out to everyone. I really appreciate, as I know so many others do, what y'all have done from the pandemic standpoint on both the medical side of things as well as on the economic impact. And I have a question, and I acknowledge I don't know whether this would even be something that might come up. The third thing our nation is dealing with, first off, is the medical. Then we've got the financial economic side of that. And I don't know if we know in some respects how many people have been helped. One question is, do we know how many people are still waiting to be helped? And I know, Phyllis, you mentioned that you've got certain lists that you can track. Moving to the third major issue that is affecting our country right now, which in many ways brings just great sadness to so many people around the country, yet at the same time, kind of being a silver lining person, I'm hoping that the country is finally opening our eyes to the impact of the systemic and institutionalized racism, largely as a result of police violence against Black Americans and people of color. Phyllis, do you see, and we've been very fortunate, I think, in this point in Charlottesville and Albemarle County, that we have not experienced any of the violence that has, resulted in other locations. Do you see anything coming out of that concern right now that social services would somehow have a need to provide assistance on? It's just something that I know is weighing on a lot of people's minds, what's happening in the country right now. I have received a number of inquiries from people about things like school resource officers and different funding. I personally don't believe that we can fully defund law enforcement. Without some law enforcement, we'll just have anarchy. But I do agree with those who believe that we need to look at what we are funding. Chief Lance and I have had a number of communications about proper training, proper procedures, and proper accountability for those, making sure we first off only try to hire those that are psychologically really fit to be police officers, and then those who commit misconduct, that they're held accountable. But it's just a question. Do you see anything that social services may need or want or desire to get involved in as we work through that social issue right now in the country and in our county?
The way I would answer that, I think, is that what my focus right now has been is dealing with the impact that this has on my department itself in terms of the workforce. And I've been, doing a lot to encourage dialogue, to encourage, reflection, and some teams have been having robust dialogue. There's certainly a great deal of just what's the word I'm looking for? Angst, for lack of a better word, amongst my staff, and I think that it's so multi-layered. There's the personal experiences that some of my staff have had in their lives and their families. There's concern about going into their clients' homes and whether they'll be accepted, received. Certainly, we do a lot of work with the police, and so we need to think about whether the relationship, how that relationship will be viewed by our clients, in terms of when interviews are being done. So, it's really hard to answer that question in one particular way. I think what's really important for us to do right now is look at our own department and how we function, and to challenge ourselves to make sure that we are not contributing to that basic systemic racism, and also to partner with our fellow county staff to work together in terms of addressing it in the community. Aside from that, I don't know of a specific way in which DSS would be, targeted, have a targeted involvement in this, other than just helping our clients and being mindful of the impact of this on our clientele.
Thank you, Phyllis. And actually, I think you just made some really good points in there in terms of the interaction between staff and clients and everything.
The interaction with what?
The interaction between staff and clients.
Mm-hmm.
That really was a valid point. And it wasn't specifically that I was expecting that you would have an answer. It's just been on my mind. What do we as a county, what can we as a county do to help to make it a better world? And obviously social services, that's what y'all do. So I just thought it would be an opportunity to ask the question. I will continue to work with, the other departments in the county, and definitely with Chief Lance. It's so important that we not, I think, over police. I mean, I think all of us have probably seen the situations where a family member calls for help because they have another member of their family who is suffering from something. It may be an emotional, mental health, it may be a substance abuse, and they call law enforcement for help. And next thing you know, the family member has been shot and killed. And it's just like, oh my God, that was the last thing that they feel like they should have done now when they thought they were doing the right thing. And I just thought that perhaps maybe because the Department of Social Services deals with so many people facing those sort of situations, just wanted to ask. I'll just continue to take the information and try and continue to work with, Chief Lance to make sure that, we really do protect and serve. And I feel very fortunate at this point that we have not had any of the experiences that many other communities have had. And we have to continue to work to make sure that we don't. So thank you for letting me take a few minutes for that.
Yeah, additional thing I'll share is that even before all of this, we have been very interested in diving in to look at, to tease out the fact that our clientele does not mirror the population in the county. And one of my concerns is whether there's a potential for disproportionate minority representation in our customer base. And so we've actually just recently entered into an agreement with UVA to do some research on our data to see if we can determine any correlations between decisions on the CPS side. Do we have a disproportionate representation in the families that are founded for abuse and neglect? And do we have a more of a minority representation in that than mirrors the population, and so really look at some of our decision making, just trying to drill down to see what kind of biases, biases we might be bringing to the work. So we actually started doing that even before the pandemic hit, because it's been an interest of ours. That's just an aside there. Siri, do you have anything to could offer your words of wisdom?
Oh, wait me up for success, Phyllis. I don't know that I have words of wisdom. I think, we as an organization are working to continue to make imperfect progress. And I don't know, this is a hard time for me to answer a question like that, but I guess just to be candid and to be, transparent, we have a ways to go, much like every other organization. We're 275 years old. And that's 275 years worth of a lot of things. A lot of those things weren't necessarily promoting equity or well-being for all of our residents. And I think that we as an organization have been growing our commitment, strengthening our commitment to really living authentically and sincerely in our value and in our mission. And yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to say the mission today, because if you know me, you know I like to say it every day. And I don't know if you're all familiar with the Albemarle County mission. Pop quiz time. Yeah, okay, well, our mission is to enhance the well-being and quality of life of all of our citizens. And then, there's some government gobbledygook at the end. but I like to stick with that first part. And that's a mission that I think we take seriously. And as we grow our understanding of what it means to enhance the well-being and quality of life for all of our residents, I think you'll see changes accordingly. And I think it is tough conversations like what Phyllis is talking about, considering not just the work itself, but the role of social services within this system that does have, we do see disproportionality. And we know that that's not just DSS. We know that, government is a powerful system, especially on a community level. We have many arms and many contributions to this community. A lot of them are positive, and some of them need to be evaluated to be sure that those positive benefits are being distributed equitably across the community. And so I guess I would just say that that's work that we, much like our board members, are working very diligently to embrace and to increase our accountability and our transparency along those issues.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Just barely.
I'm having trouble with my microphone, but I want to see if Karen had questions or comments. I did want to kind of loop back around to what Donna was saying, and Phyllis, what you were saying, and you probably know the name of the training, but I know that having worked in social services and interacted with police officers, that there's a training that police officers could have that I understand, and I don't want to get into defunding police officers in this format, but I've seen some things where it says, police officers aren't mental health professionals, they're not social workers and these sort of things, but we do know, and I think we have evidence of it in our community, that officers that have been through some training that's about sensitivity and about how to de-escalate situations where mental health is involved and where they can learn to identify when that's in play, have proven to be really helpful. And in those situations, I feel like from my perspective as a social worker in the past, I think there's some times where that's helped things from becoming a misunderstanding that could have led to something awful happening. So I feel like that's a piece that I don't know if DSS taking a stance on that, but I do know a lot in the past we've talked about that officers have been offered that training. Phyllis, do you know the name of that training that some police officers go through?
Are you talking about the CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team?
Well, I'm not necessarily, because I think like a lot of people can take things, like back when I was working for the department, there was a training that officers were giving to be able to identify a situation if they are interacting with an individual where there are signs of mental health or there's signs.
Are you talking about the police officers giving the training to our staff?
Getting it.
Huh? Oh, well, I know there's that they participate in a program that I think Region 10 has been involved in. I'm not sure. I can't hear, I don't think we can hear you.
I remember police officers were participating in that and getting that type of thing. And I remember hearing about it a couple years ago. It was creating some more sensitivity to who they might be interacting with, particularly if it's someone that has a developmental disability or a mental health issue, and misunderstandings might be happening if they're not aware that, this is what's going on. Or you have someone who's autistic or something like that, and they can sort of have cues to the behavior they're seeing so they can de-escalate a situation that might otherwise escalate. And I just think that's the type of thing that I feel like I would definitely support and promote, that I think good officers would want opportunity to learn more about that. And then I want to make sure Karen has time if she has questions. One thing I did write down was the point about reaching out to some of the more remote locations. And I wondered, and maybe Siri can answer this, but I think trying to keep track must be really hard about all the resources that are out there to get people meals. And I know we have, all the time when school's out, we have kids who maybe don't get lunch because they were getting lunch at school. And now we've had that, exacerbated by the situation. And I know schools were having locations where they were making meals and sandwiches to deliver. And then I've seen, I think it's like Charlottesville Albemarle Mutual Aid has a thing on Facebook. And so I've seen different groups that are just like, even if we just take meals to families, I wonder if Siri knows if there's a way to collect all those resources together. And in doing so, that could help show us like who we're missing. If we collect together who we're reaching out to, we know we're getting stuff to the urban ring, maybe not as much as we need to, but maybe that gives us a tip into where we're missing, particularly in the rural areas, where people can't come to pick up stuff, where we might need to do drop off.
Right. That's a great question and a great point. And I would say that's something that we are working towards right now. So we are, a lot of even the disparate pieces of some of these food, sort of not food service, but food providing services, mutual aid infrastructure, or other types of traditional nonprofit agencies are connected, both through Cultivate Charlottesville and through the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. And we are plugged into those. So right now we are working both with Cultivate Charlottesville and with the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, where folks are calling to touch base with these organizations and with the food pantries all over the county, checking in on what they're experiencing, who they're serving, and what sort of changes they're seeing or what sort of needs they have. So, and that's information that is being fed directly back to us, and that we are working to support where it's needed / appropriate. And we are partnering. One of the things, we didn't really get into it on the slide when we were talking about some of those partners, with the UVA Equity Center, for example, and UVA's Batten School of Public Policy. We've been working with both of those groups around actually creating some mapping of what our food system infrastructure looks like, so that we can be identifying potential gaps. I hope you don't hear the sound of monsters in the background. Yeah, a little bit. That's just, my professional mood music. But very much, Jenny, we are absolutely invested in better understanding that and seeing where those gaps are and where we can potentially be plugged in.
One other comment I had was, I like the part when you talked about resiliency and how we're learning from what we're going through now and how that positions us for future, hopefully not, but that could happen. But I also think the resiliency is as we continue to go through this, because it's not over. And a lot of times with resiliency, I think like Phyllis, just an example, was in your informational items where you had someone who had rent due, and that was 1 month's rent, and you were able to help with a part of it, but they still owe $250 and they're going to work that out with the landlord. But I mean, the reality is for a lot of families, that $250 right now, we've stopped something from happening that, helps that family. But, a lot of families can't absorb that into as things come back to normal, that it's $250 hanging over their head. And we know that's probably happening for a lot of people who might be getting relief now, but then as we start to reopen and people can get back to it, a lot of families don't have that padding in their income to recover from things that were sort of forgiven temporarily or pushed down the road. I think during this time, we can be creative about, how can we help with that when we get to that place, even though we've helped with what's happened right now, and that's great, it's awesome, but we have to acknowledge that just pushing the bills away a little bit is gonna, for a lot of families, it's just gonna have a problem later with how to manage that. And so I think that we have an opportunity now to sort of plan for strategies on how we might offer help and assistance. And that's a big part of what Siri talks about is we're only better when we have these great community partnerships, because a lot of things like that are going to be resolved through strong community partnerships.
So another area that Siri and I are working together is that the county just learned how much the county will be getting through the CARES Act. And there are several categories that a locality can use the money in. And one of them is in human service type needs. And so we're talking about, just some ideas and coming up with a set of recommendations that we'll be making about how the county could utilize this funding to address some of those issues. And we are really looking at it through the lens of, how can we make some long-term impacts, not just put the Band-Aid on, but, supporting nonprofits that are focused on helping folks achieve self-sufficiency, looking at food insecurity as a whole in our area. So that's another task that we've taken on. And there are other categories that this funding can be used for, and other people are working on those. On generating ideas.
For the last, but one other thought I had when you were talking about like the mask fittings in the facilities, specifically like assisted living and nursing home, I wondered if are they being offered some kind of guidance from state level about how to approach a situation when they have some folks that are staying there that test positive or that are waiting the results of a test? Every facility is sort of set up different, but are they sort of quarantining those people that are
there's some very established guidelines that the CDC and the Virginia Department of Health.
Okay.
And so the facility is expected to follow certain protocols and procedures if they have someone that's tested positive or, has become really ill. So one of the things that I mentioned, the fire and rescue and DSS staff, they've been trying to help the facilities think through how to implement or to implement those protocols. But there's a whole set of guidelines that the Department of Health has published.
Yeah, and I would just support what Phyllis said about the work that DSS and fire rescue have been doing in terms of ongoing outreach and communication and really strong connections to all of the long-term care facilities in the county. I think that's really been one of the greatest successes of the work that's been done. There's been a lot of work in really working very closely with folks from the very beginning, both on prevention plans and then also what to do, like you're saying, Jenny, in the event that folks do test positive. So that's been a strong point of emphasis, I think, from multiple staff parties.
We can't hear you.
How about now? No. How about now? Better?
Yeah.
So I won't talk more since y'all can't hear me anyways, but I guess the last thing I'd say is that feels good to hear, because I think, you know, whether it's as a private citizen or whether you're working in a, you know, assisted living facility, or everybody out there on the front lines, when there's a lack of some kind of consistent guidelines from the federal government, people are looking to the state and then local officials and agencies to help provide that guidance that we might not be getting. And that is something that I think is so important right now. And I think, you know, overall, I'm so impressed with, you know, what Virginia as a state has done, and then especially the county trying to get back to meetings and try to get back to sort of normal during all this, engage our community. I think that's really powerful. It's really reassuring to communities in a time where so much is uncertain. And so thank you all for all that you've done. And Karen, did you have stuff to comment on or questions?
No, I've just been listening in amazement of, again, how many social services has, and the quality of work that they do.
Right. Amy?
I don't know if we're going to be talking about the notes, which, by the way, again, Phyllis, really incredible information. Jenny, is this the time? I think the only thing I'm wondering from the notes that you give us is, could you include like how many people like are on the waiting list? Only just because I think it really adds impact to the information that you're providing. Like how many children are in foster care? How many clients do we have for cooling, the cooling program, etc. If you have that information, I don't want to add to anything.
No, that's fine. You know, over the years, boards have differed on what their interests are. And there was a time when they didn't want to know numbers. So I'm very happy to give you numbers. I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. If you guys are interested in that, I only think it adds impact.
Oh yeah, we track it. We track, yeah.
Sure, I was thinking that.
Track the numbers, we track whether we're meeting our processing standards and our other mandates. So I would be happy to do that.
Then the only other thing I would say is, you know, as Siri and you are Phyllis looking for partnerships, I think Catherine brings up such an important component of the churches who are already, you know, really serving a lot of people. And, you know, if there's any communication that can be gained with that, I know the African American Pastors Council, but I don't know how to do that exactly. I'm just offering that as we're trying to track, you know, child abuse, domestic abuse, trying to provide more services to people. I feel like Catherine's point about the churches, if there's any way to make a better partnership. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is, you know, there's this thing called the Virginia Inclusive Communities. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they do training on, you know, racial bias, and, you know, it's something just to look up as, you know, we want to become more educated. And anyway, I found that really interesting. I've seen school boards and school divisions go through some of their training to help. So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, just let me clarify. I am the president of 18 churches, but it's not the Black churches. We're all different not denominations. My thing is we're all colors, we're all kinds. So, but we're from the North Garden, Codesville, Alberine, Batesville group, and it's all the churches. Actually, my vice president is the pastor of 3 Methodist churches. So we have Episcopalian, Presbyterians, we have more Baptists than anybody else, but we do, and we have 2 non-denominational churches. So it's like almost like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 mile radius, but we're all people. That's our goal, was to see what we had to offer that we could work together to make the community better. So we have been doing that now for, well, 8 years, I think, 8 or 9. So the word goes out, but it just doesn't hit just the Black church. They go to all of us.
So I didn't mean to say that. I just, your outreach through the
Yeah,
church.
I just wanted to make sure of that because my vice president is a super, super pastor. I wanted to make sure he really, we work really well together, how board.
There was an organization, can you guys hear me? I'm having trouble with my microphone. There was an organization that was, I think it was Love Inc. I don't know if they're still doing what they're doing, but it was a way to pull together all churches who I guess were familiar with it, but it was a pretty cool thing. And I don't know if that is still happening or if it's working well, but you could, you know, put a request to them of a need or put out, we have this offer, and they sort of spread that out through multiple different churches, you know, to fill a need or to find out how to coordinate things. So I feel like that's a way to sort of mobilize, you know, all the different church communities together who are reaching a common goal, or to know where there's a gap missing. And that, and sort of like what you were saying about having masks, if you're having it set up to give out masks, trying to coordinate where you're located and not duplicating where someone just did that with the county or that type of thing, I think is how we're going to get better and better at this. So,
Love Inc. still exists. It's scaled down quite a bit, but it still exists.
okay.
But they came to our annual meeting, the guy from Love Inc. last year, not this past year. And so we partnered with them. We didn't go under them, but we partnered with them.
Right.
They sent us information and somebody, and that's really how he came about with us. He had contacted a church out here that a family needed help. So we do work along with them, but we're not under them, and they're not under.
I think they just get their information pushed out.
Right, we partner.
Great. Well, we're getting close to 5. Thank you, Siri and Phyllis, for this was a really great topic to cover. And thank you, Donna, for attending, and thanks for having Diantha here, even though she had to move along to another meeting. So for our message out, Phyllis, you'll do your magic. And
Well, what I'd like to do this time is include some of the ideas that you all shared, just to sort of have a record of them. And that way it not only we kind of track them, but then we can share that with the board. So I can share the PowerPoint, and then you can take and highlight, but then I'll also summarize some of the ideas that you had, like, for example, putting something in the newsletter and the Nextdoor app, that kind of thing. So
we'll get that from you. And as always, don't just forward it, you know, cut and paste, and, you know, we can add a little bit of our own stuff, but we want to make sure we're sending out a consistent message to the supervisors. So I appreciate all of you being here. And
I just want to say thank you to Siri again.
yes, thank you, Siri.
Thank you for having me.
And I think maybe, I don't know, you know, it could be touchy to get into this type of thing, but I think some of the stuff Donna brought up and some of the other things that are going on and, you know, our world and our lives right now that are stressors, you know, I don't know, Phyllis, how you feel about, you know, how we might approach some of the stuff that outside of what's going on with COVID, what's going on in the country, and, you know, how you're engaging your staff. And just being, one of the things that I think at least my community is craving is resources that they can share with their children or just watch to educate themselves about how we really, you know, get to a place where we're making changes that are meaningful, and just not being upset right now and letting things pass by, and then we're back in the same situation again and someone else has lost their life that shouldn't have. And so I think there's a big outcry, I know, in my community, and there's a group that's forming that's sharing like the one thing that was mentioned about the, I wrote it on my notes somewhere, now I can't read it, but I guess good resources, whether it's like a webinar that you can watch or a movie that has a positive message or books that people can read, and particularly those that we can share with children of different ages, because it's never really too young to start talking about this stuff, in my opinion. And so I don't know if that's something that's outside of what DSS would be comfortable in talking about at a monthly meeting, but I do know there's a lot of people in the community who want really good, solid resources that they can start watching and using, and using that to take action. So I will just leave with that as an idea.
I would certainly be happy to share with you some of what I've been sending to my staff.
Okay,
Articles and videos and that kind of thing.
that would be great.
But I also rely heavily on our Office of Equity and Inclusion.
I was just going to say that there's certainly several resources that we could share with this board. I would also note that there'll be an opportunity. The email should be coming out tomorrow, actually, on the county's learning catalog. And I don't know if that's something, Phyllis, that this group usually is plugged into, or if we ever offer them an opportunity to participate in that sort of thing.
Sure.
But we'll be running an ongoing conversation around racial equity. We'll be starting June 19th, so Juneteenth, and we will be ending on March 3rd, which is Liberation and Freedom Day, or marking local emancipation. So if you guys have any interest in potentially participating in that, and I will be sharing it with the board as well, then that's something that certainly you guys will be able to participate in as well. And there will be ongoing discussions as well as many resources involved in that.
I can send you that link.
Can you guys hear me? I'm ready to adjourn if everyone can hear me.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you as always for your support. Very much appreciated.